departure because I'm more of a manager than a researcher, and talking more about another element to the National Audubon programs. This research ranch is dedicated to research and conservation protection. Audubon as an organization is built on the mission statement of connecting people with nature, and our strength over the many decades of our existence has been our volunteer members. And we started this early on with Christmas bird counts over 100 years ago in some parts of the country. And so one of the things I'm really interested in, and I'm hoping my talk can be more iterative with individuals like Courtney and Janet, as to how we can create some intersections so that we can take this science, this really excellent science that's being collected by researchers, and then bridge the time when you all don't have the money and you go away, and we can go for a very long time period, as you pointed out, Janet, where there's no information being collected. And then being able to take that to the managers of these sites, these land managers, so that they can actually implement practices that will result in good conservation of those sites. So a major program that Audubon is engaged in nationally is the important bird areas. And we have 40 of these sites now identified here in the state of Arizona. This process of identification is data-driven by collecting supporting information that meets established criteria for a site to have state designation. And we have a committee of scientists that look at the applications of nomination for a site, and then they approve it or not based on that information. Of those, 6 are here in southeastern Arizona that have significant grassland components associated with them. And there are also additional sites that really should be part of this network that aren't in it yet because we don't have that data. And both Courtney Conway and Janet Ruth have done research at 2 of these sites, the Las Ciénegas Empire and San Rafael Valley. And so one of our challenges is to find the supporting information to bring these sites into this network. So why do we care? Why would we want them in this network? And these are the sites that are currently in the system: the San Pedro River National Riparian Conservation Area. All the work that was done by Dave Creeper when he was there really nominated that in, and now you've essentially repeated a lot of that information with the research that you've been doing there with your students and associates. And so for us to be able to consolidate that information, come up with ways even to use the models that both of you are working on to try to express what the likely occurrence of some of these focal species might be on a landscape. And we can use that information as well. Buenos Aires National Wildlife Refuge is another site, and then the 3 Sky Island mountain ranges that are around here, and of course this site here, the Appleton Whittle Research Ranch. This is just a map to show you where all the sites are throughout the state. A large concentration of them in the riparian areas on our rivers, and of course southeastern Arizona grasslands and Sky Island mountain ranges really light up the map. And as Janet said earlier, well, I'll talk about this first, is that we're part of an international program. National Audubon Society is the U.S. partner with BirdLife International to deliver the important bird area program for the United States. And so Mexico is actually now a gray-colored partner, so it's a country-level program. And actually, the entire region to the south of here is a Mexico important bird area that is globally significant. And so there's real opportunities for us to approach this more on an international scale and see if we can accomplish conservation strategies that integrate in these landscapes with our two countries. And again, Janet, I think, spoke to that quite well with where some of these birds probably go when they're not here. That makes it even more important. Related to this is we also tie into the Bird Conservation Initiative. And so we are sitting in a bird conservation region that's called the Sierra Madre. And we have protected watch list birds that are species of greatest conservation need, particularly in our grasslands. And again, Janet Ruth spoke to some of them. And some of these birds are nesting birds, but many of them are target birds that occur here in the winter only. And as Janet pointed out, that winter occurrence is not very predictable. It's a little bit easier to nail down the occurrence of the rufous-winged sparrows and do breeding bird surveys and get a sense of what's going on with these birds. But a longspur in the winter or a Baird sparrow in the winter, that can be pretty tricky. The list of winter species of conservation concern that can occur in this region is this group of birds. The mountain plover is currently being considered for listing as a threatened species by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It breeds much further north. This bird, in reading the proposal for listing, again, there's a paucity of data about what goes on with this bird in the wintertime. They are in Mexico as well as here. And again, where they will appear at any given time period is quite variable. Long-billed curlew tends to be more associated with the grasslands near playas and wetlands. So I wouldn't expect that bird to show up particularly in the Sonoita Valley. Where we get records of them, of course, is over in Elgin and that area in the San Simon. Sprague's pipit, which Janet mentioned as a bird that she's detected on her winter bird surveys. Brewer's sparrow, which we do get in fairly high numbers here in the wintertime. Sage sparrow, again a northern nester that's coming down here in the winter. And lark buntings, Baird sparrow, and chestnut-collared longspur. Some of these birds can occur sporadically in large numbers, and others are only going to be detected one or two at a time. So one of our challenges is understanding how these birds work in the winter. And Rocky Mountain Bird Observatory has been doing a lot of research trying to address this as well, with doing surveys in Mexico. When I talk to the folks that get the grants and go out and do this work, the difficulty is trying to get that long term, which Janet was talking about. And so it may require species-specific monitoring and maybe some specialized techniques to get at these birds. Dr. Bach mentioned how hard it is to detect Montezuma quail. Scaled quail is another bird that is actually in decline, it would appear, based on breeding bird survey route and Christmas bird count data. And again, it may be a bird that's sensitive to the subdivision that's occurring in this region. So global and continental species that then are of conservation concern, and these are birds that have been placed on a list through an analysis of a continental committee, and in the case of one of these birds, it's the Baird sparrow on an international committee. They have a status either with the National Audubon Society, where they're red listed, which means these are species in highest jeopardy, federally listed, in this case the Aplamado falcon, which does not occur over here at this point in time in any numbers, or hasn't particularly documented here, I don't believe. I think there's some possible records. Is an endangered species. And then the watch list birds for Audubon which also corresponds with those birds of conservation concern that the North American Birding Association has listed, and now the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, using a site by habitat and attempt to document the abundance. And so, you know, Janet really presented some good protocols for getting at that kind of thing. And then monitor change in composition of the avian community at that site and document any of those changes in abundance for a particular species. So this is the idea of trying to collect information consistently over time. And I think that this is the biggest challenge for these winter birds because they're hard to identify, they're not vocalizing, and they tend to be in large areas. I mentioned the Christmas bird counts that are conducted by Audubon nationally, and also there's some sites in Mexico that have, and in Canada that have these counts. And the primary objective is to try to catch the status and distribution of wintering birds across the Western Hemisphere. There are, these are 15-mile in diameter circles. So a disadvantage immediately of a Christmas bird count is that 15-mile diameter takes in a high diversity of habitats. And so unless you're coordinating with the compiler and can actually differentiate where some of the data was collected and be more geospecific, these are gross scale data trends. The volunteer compiler does break their circle up into teams, and I've worked with some compilers to actually get that separated data from them as it relates to an important bird area, and then we can work with that. Teams can further separate within the assigned area. A lot of factors influence Christmas bird count information. How many people went out and tried to do it that year, that can vary, so per unit effort observations can change, and then the teams may not be able to cover the entire circle because of access, because of numbers, because of time. So I'm just being really candid with you with its limitations. Its advantage is the fact that it's done for a long time period in the same place, generally in the same way, and it can detect gross level changes in whether birds are there or not, or is there a long-term trend decline. And so weaknesses aside, because this is a methodology that's been used for a long time, and with the breeding bird survey routes that are being conducted also by volunteers that catches some breeding birds, these data sets are what generate some of the range maps that were being shown to you by some of the presenters this morning, because it does give you a continent-wide view, and it's less than perfect. And one of the things we're challenged with here in this region is that these are not necessarily the best methodologies. So for instance, our grassland breeding birds are busy right now, way after the breeding bird survey routes are done. So there's some real challenges. This is just to give you an idea of where we have these routes, these circles. And so we have a circle here at the research ranch, which was just started. There's one in Elfrida, or no, this is the Chiricahuas, and then there is one over in the, I'm sorry, I'm confused. I'm geographically confused here. And we got Patagonia and the Elfrida one here. And we started a circle here on the research ranch. And Linda, she said, yeah, I don't know what the outer perimeter of that circle is.
It's almost geographically centered on the research range here. So
right.
7.5.
Yeah, so you go 7.5 miles in all directions, which will take you off the research ranch. Yeah, and into some other habitat types. So these do give you a sense, though, of where your numbers are. And as Janet's work affirmed, those birds that I showed before do show up in this region. And so the valleys that she's studied, and also the grasslands in northern Sonora and in Chihuahua, are key sites for these wintering birds. And they do move and seem to change in abundance from year to year and site to site. And it's not well understood where they go when they're not where you're looking for them. And so I'm really interested in input as to how we might tackle this. There is a tool out there that's not managed by Audubon, but it's the eBird site that the Cornell Lab of Ornithology manages. And this is an approach to encourage birders to start putting their information into a database. And when birders put their information into this, if it says minimal as a checklist, it at least gives a geographic site record for the species. And again, eBird has its strengths and weaknesses based on the skill of the observer and on the level of accuracy in which they collect their information. What eBird is encouraging people to do is go the next level. So one methodology they have is a traveling account, where you walk a trail or you maybe search an area in the grasslands and you have a known time period while you were doing this, and then you estimate how far you traveled, whether it was by walking, driving, or even on the water. And then you put that effort into your data sets. And the other thing you're asked to do is actually keep track of how many of each species you see. This can become onerous for a recreational birder. However, this is a data management tool that could be used by trained volunteers to actually go out there and collect information in this more structured format. And then that begins to contribute to a body of knowledge. They also have a stationary count where instead of moving around, you stay in an area, so it's kind of a quasi-point count methodology. And again, it's the same idea. It's a required date and effort with a start and end time. It's a little bit easier to get a birder who's out there for other reasons to maybe take 10 minutes or so out of their birding trip and do something like this and keep it as a separate data set and then go on and do their birding and not think about it anymore. There's also the opportunity with eBird, should you encounter a large number of long-billed curlew when you're out on survey or out doing something else, to be able to actually record that observation as an entry, and maybe not include all the other birds you were seeing that day, but get a geographic location. They have a Google gadget on this so that you can actually pinpoint where you were, so you get a GPS coordinate for where the birds were observed. And this can then become really valuable information. So for these target species that can show up in large numbers on migration or happen to be on a site, I know a few years ago we had a huge influx of short-eared owls down here. And I know nobody actually put that into eBird. And maybe somebody in their birding journal actually put down how many they saw, but it's not out there where I could harvest that data and actually try to use it to support the nomination of, for instance, San Rafael Valley, or support the importance of a site like the Audubon Research Ranch. And so this is a tool that can be used pretty effectively, and it can be done in two ways. One, like I say, informal entry into the system, or through a coordinated effort where a group of folks agree on what they're going to do and that they're going to make these entries into eBird, and then we know where our entries are and we can work with that. For the Important Bird Area program, Scott Wilver, my colleague, has developed some protocols that are easy for volunteers to follow. Line, transect, and area search. And again, I think with some modification, I liked Janet's protocol where somebody was out there, you know, spooking up the birds. And in a way, that's almost an area search. because you've got people kind of covering a set block, and there might be a way to adopt that so that this would be another way we could approach collecting some of this information with trained volunteers and start to collect better data and support what you're doing if there was an opportunity to continue it with folks that we felt were competent. And so that does then require recruiting folks that are willing to do this. And again, we do have a point count protocol. Requires a little bit more training. This works better in the breeding season, but I do believe point counts are what Rocky Mountain Bird Observatory is using even for their winter surveys. I'm not certain of that. They do it, yeah. So area search is probably the best one to try to adapt for trying to capture what's going on with these grassland birds. What we have discovered with using volunteers is they like variety, and they also want to get the advanced training. Dr. Jane Bach's comments about the variation you get with volunteers, that's absolutely true, and it's important to thank and recognize them. On the other hand, we have some volunteers that have been at this for a very long time, and they're very competent. The advantage of using our database is we've set it up so it can be queried, and our land manager partners can actually look at the data as it's been collected. And with all due respect to the university researchers, it's really hard to get at that information except in a summarized report that's a published paper. And so that's another thing I'd like to talk to the university folks about is maybe it's through your models, but in some way be able to put out there some measure of species density or species abundance for these habitat types. And I know you worked with me on the black rail towards that end so that we can use this information. One of the things we have put into this database is in fact a way to come up with birds per kilometer squared or birds per linear kilometer to give a sense of frequency of occurrence and an ability to compare our summaries across the years. So this is how this database is being used. It's for the nominations of our sites and for the managers and our partners. This program is integrated into the Arizona Game and Fish Department's Arizona Bird Conservation Initiative. And so I guess I view what we're trying to do here as the bridge. And the other thing we're trying to create is management guidance for land managers. So again, the research that comes from folks like you, we're really keenly interested in how we can then translate that over to the land managers. And this whole issue of groundwater loss in the case of the riparian, prescriptions on grasslands in the case of the grassland birds. So I'll just, and so then the outcome of that is the Important Bird Areas program is intended to initiate community outreach and involve biologists with the community, as is done here at the Research Ranch, and to help develop the strategies for collaborative science. And this facilitate not only public lands, but private landowner habitat conservation. And so the sites that aren't in our system yet do include those sites that are privately owned, and we're interested in bringing them into the network as well. So that's the presentation. I think we've got yeah, one question, or you can talk to me afterwards. Good enough? Oh, yes. Bill.
Well, so the Christmas bird count seems to be the longest running data set.
Yes.
I'm wondering how you sort of try and use this to validate that or integrate the sort of more recent stuff you're getting, which supposedly would be better.
Right.
That without sort of losing that or
yeah, I think
minimizing that value, because the time difference
The time depth is the critical thing with the Christmas bird counts, absolutely. And certain circles have more of an advantage that way than others. I think the circle here at the ranch is, 3 years old now. So there's value in keeping that as a data collection methodology and not discouraging the Christmas bird count effort. And that's why my inclination, especially with winter birds, is to focus on those species of greatest conservation interest and see if there's ways in which we can set up complementary surveys that would include areas that aren't within the circles and hopefully reinforce what the counts are telling us.